Hello, good evening everybody. A warm welcome to How to Get Your Business Fit for Nuclear webinar. My name is Eva Ferran, Supply Chain Development Manager for Cumbria Chamber of Commerce. As a pioneer in the development of nuclear power station, the UK has a legacy of nuclear power generation in various stages of closing down and decommissioning. 17 nuclear sites across the UK will reach the end of their lifespan. The estimated decommissioning cost is a staggering £3 billion per year. Decommissioning work alone will see businesses securing tens of millions of pounds worth of new contracts. So how can your business be part of this supply chain? Then again, what about the future of nuclear and nuclear new build? Both decommissioning and nuclear new build present the industry with a range of opportunity. There are opportunities for businesses already in the supply chain looking to expand their work in the sector or enter it for the first time. Opportunity for training providers to support the skills development in this area. Institutions such as the National Nuclear Laboratory and the Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre have a key role to play in supporting the sector. The Fit for Nuclear program have seen almost 100 companies go through the assessment and are now ready to bid for work in the sector. It is important that funding is maintained to support smaller businesses. So where do you fit in the nuclear sector supply chain? Once again, think outside the box. Can your business supply to the nuclear sector? Do you have specialist engineering skills that can be adapted to fit the nuclear sector? Are you in the food and drinks sector? Supplier of commercial services? Remember, nuclear does not just mean advanced engineering and specialist nuclear-related work. You may be a supplier of PPE, a commercial window cleaning firm, a catering company supplying food and drinks on sites. Supplier who are currently working in other sectors can equally find opportunities in the nuclear sector. Of course, to get your business fit to work in the world's most heavily regulated industry is not going to be plain sailing. Good news is there are support available. At Cumbria Growth Hub, the one-stop shop for business support, we have developed the online supply chain gateway to help you understand what large organizations expect from suppliers and, more importantly, how to meet their procurement needs to find the lucrative contracts. Essentially, what we are doing at the Growth Hub is helping businesses to do more business with other businesses. We offer joint-up thinking and a holistic approach to help you. When you approach us for advice, we draw on a full range of support available from ourselves and from others to offer a personalized package, therefore maximizing the benefits to you. Give us a call and let us help you grow your business. We can offer a range of support from free one-to-one advice with our professional business advisors to training courses and workshops to help you obtain the right accreditations or help you with bid writing. We can explore different funding streams that you may be eligible for to support your business growth. We also work with different organizations and can link you with other initiatives such as the Fit for Nuclear program. We recognize that organizations such as, for example, Sellafield are looking to collaborate and deliver innovative solutions. We actively want to engage with such organizations to support the SMEs in upskilling and obtain the right accreditations to meet the requirements of the sector. I will be working actively with large organizations to encourage transparency, to encourage accessibility in their procurement process, and working with our team of specialist advisors to support SMEs in their business growth. So the call to action is support is available. Please do give us a call. My details are on the screen, and I'll give it to you again at the end of the session. There will be opportunity for a Q&A session at the end, and I would like to encourage you to submit your questions at any time during this session, and we will pick this up at the end. I'm now going to pass you over to Alan Smithson from AS Business and Technical Solutions. Alan will give you an overview of the UK civil nuclear sector. Alan has a wealth of experience in the nuclear and manufacturing sectors, working for the likes of Vickers Shipbuilding and Engineering, now known as BAE Systems, and through his own business has contracts with the NDA, Chamber of Commerce, amongst others. So over to you, Alan.
Thank you very much, Eva. Good evening, everybody. Today, as Eva said, we're going to take an overview of the UK civil nuclear market. I'm not going to repeat what we said last week about the manufacturing sector. The majority, in fact, all of what was said last week in last week's webinar is relevant to the nuclear sector, so I'm not going to repeat that. If you missed it, please check into our website. You can catch a recording of it there. So if we look at an overview of the current market, it splits into four broad sectors. There is the current generating fleet, where the existing power stations are supplying to the grid. Future power stations, where we need to keep the lights on by replacing the outdated nuclear and other fueled stations, and decommissioning of the older nuclear stations. And finally, how to engage with the market, which is the whole market. We have a potential to supply to all three of these sectors. I'm going to start by looking at the current generators. Currently, we have 7 AGR stations and 1 pressurized water reactor station. AGR is Advanced Gas Cooled Reactor, and generates about 20% of the UK demand. These stations are, as you can see, at Dungeness B, Hartlepool, Heysham 1 and 2, Hinkley Point B and Hunterston B, Sizewell B, and Torness, and Sizewell B is the pressurized water reactor. These power stations have all been through a life extension program, and their lives have been extended to between 2023, which is for Hinkley and Hunterston, and 2035 for Dungeness B. That's basically to keep the electrical supply going. And there is an opportunity to supply into the existing power network of power stations because they need to maintain their capacity. There's approximately 8,900 megawatts installed there. That MWE is megawatts electrical. Obviously, because of the efficiency of a power station, they generate more than that in terms of heat power and mechanical power, but that's the actual output to the electrical output to the grid. EDF operates these stations, and this is a little bit about its supply chain. You can see them on the map there. Their spend with all of their generators, not just the nuclear, is about 1.3 billion per annum, which is quite a significant sum. They have very good supplier information on their management portal, which is available on the website that I'll give you the link to later. These slides will be available on request if you want to catch the links that I've put into them. On the management portal for EDF, you can register as a new supplier, or you can request to be assessed as a new supplier. What will happen if you register there, that you will be reviewed by the appropriate supply chain team. They will contact you and let you know what you would need to do to meet the requirements of becoming a supplier. And this is the link. Let's move on now to the new power stations. These are the planned power stations for the future of our electricity supply. Again, EDF Energy are in here with the China General Nuclear Power Corporation. They have these possible sites. We know that Hinkley Point C is currently under construction. That's got two AREVA reactors. They are European pressurized water reactors. And you can see they're just over 3 gigawatts electrical installed there. That's under construction at the moment. Following on from that will be Sizewell C. That's under a consultation process right now. We're not quite sure how long that is likely to take, but it needs to be on stream by 2035. And Bradwell B, this is 2 HPR1000s. This is in very early stages, and this is a 2/3 owned by China General Nuclear. It's the main Chinese investment that we're aware of in the future of UK power generation. Following on from that, we have Horizon, which is basically Hitachi. They have 2 new sites in the UK. Wilver, they're going to install 2 of their advanced boiling water reactors there, 2.6 gigawatt installed electrical output. And they're also looking at an installation in Oldbury, which is in the early stages. Not quite sure the number, whether it's 2 or 3 reactors there, but they're looking at 3.3 gigawatt installed there. Hitachi are also developing a PRISM reactor, which is, for me, very interesting because it's fueled by plutonium, fueled by a waste product, which means that that can be disposed of whilst generating power, which seems like a good idea to me. And finally, close to all our hearts is NuGen at Moorside. We are awaiting more news on this, but at the moment it looks like the Korean KEPCO is likely to start the operations there, and we're looking at approximately 3 gigawatts installation there. So we're looking there at approximately 18 gigawatt installation, which is double the output of the current fleet of power stations. Let's think about how much money is involved in this construction. Rough budget figures for Hinkley Point C, £20 billion. Sizewell C, £18 billion. Bradwell B, we don't know, but it's going to be a similar figure to those 2. Wilver is about 14 billion, Oldbury about 20 billion, and Moorside we're still not sure about. But you can see there's a huge amount of expenditure there. So if you have an opportunity or you wish to supply into the new nuclear build, then it's time now, because this is starting soon, it's time now to start to get ready. And we'll be talking about the next steps, the actual actions that can be taken to enter into the new nuclear market later in the presentation. Just a little bit of detail about the supply chain for each of these new nuclear suppliers. These are the links to the EDF supply chain, particularly Hinkley Point C. Hinkley has a very strong local supply chain support network in place. They are local businesses in their area, get a great deal of support. And if you want to supply into Hinkley from outside, you can do so, but you don't get the same level of support as the local businesses do. If you do want to supply to Hinkley C, there is a guidance document which shows exactly what is going on there, and also there is details about the work packages and contracts which have already been let and which are coming up. So this is, if you are planning to get into this market, to do some market research, that then gives you an idea of what's coming up and when, so that you can plan your business development accordingly. Again, now let's look at Horizon. A similar situation, supplier registration via their web portal. They have a detailed registration questionnaire which they ask you to fill in. It's not complicated, but it's detailed, and if you cannot answer the questions on the questionnaire, you won't get any further in the process. So if you're intending to supply to Horizon, the first port of call is to look at their questionnaire and see whether you can answer all the questions on it. Once you can, then you register with them and they will start the process of working with you to actually invite you to become a supplier. Situation with NewGen is fluid. Some of you listening may know more about this than I do. At the moment their website is supplytomillside.co.uk. But we are awaiting really what the developments are likely to be and which reactors they're going to build before we know exactly what we need to do to supply to them. There is another contact here to look into in terms of gaining new business within the nuclear sector, not just new nuclear, across the whole sector, and that's the Nuclear Industry Association. This is basically the trade association for the whole of the UK civil nuclear sector, and it has more than 250 members across all aspects of the nuclear supply chain. What that does is it means that there's a lot of industry-wide interaction if you attend their events, you join the association and attend their events. And the details for that are also at this website. And as we mentioned in the webinar last week, there are a number of other very good networking organizations. Britain's Energy Coast Business Cluster is a very good local networking organization which has a very strong representation of nuclear sector businesses, and for anybody who is interested in getting into the nuclear market, it's certainly worth attending and joining that business cluster. Useful also, their website has a list of members, which isn't usual, but they have a list of all their members which is accessible on the website. So definitely worth looking into that if you're considering the nuclear market. Networking is key, and I'm not going to labour the point, I've talked about it enough last week. So we've covered existing generating fleet, and we've covered in not a lot of detail, but as an overview, the new nuclear builds. The third sector that I mentioned was how to, the decommissioning, the old decommissioned power stations. And let's start by looking at the old power stations, the Magnox power stations. There's a number of these, Barclay and Bradwell, Calder Hall, just local to us, Chapel Cross, again local to us, Dungeness A, Hinkley Point A, Hunterston A, Oldbury, Sizewell A, Crossfinith, I hope that's right, and Wilver. You can see all those dates are when they ceased generating, so the last one went off at Wilver at 2015, so there's still a lot of decommissioning work to do. But there's only 4.4 gigawatts, 4,400 megawatts capacity there, which is very small. So we're seeing that as we move into the third generation of reactors, which we've been talking about with new nuclear build, each of the sites has a much greater capacity than these. The challenge for the Magnox stations is that they were not designed to be easily decommissioned, and that is a challenge, and there have been a lot of technical solutions produced to actually get them decommissioned, and that is now working well, but Magnox still requires people to supply it, and it has a strong supply chain. Let's look at some of the other historical sites. Capenhurst is a uranium enrichment site run by Urenco. Culham is fusion development, and Culham has just had an £86 million funding boost. Culham is not part of the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority estate. It's run by the UK Atomic Energy Authority. Dounreay in the north of Scotland is a former gas-cooled reactor, advanced gas-cooled reactor site in the middle of being decommissioned at the moment. Drigg, local to us, is the low-level waste repository site. Harwell was the original 1945 nuclear research site established by John Cockcroft, and it's now being decommissioned, but it's a site of special historical interest, as that's where everything started in the UK. Sellafield, formerly called Windscale, we've also got Windscale on this map. That's the big one for us. It was the first nuclear power station in the UK, in fact in the world. And it's busy at the moment doing fuel reprocessing. It was a site for an advanced gas-cooled reactor, and there's also a lot of decommissioning taking place on that site. Springfields is nuclear fuel manufacturing, still operational down near Preston. Windscale we've just referred to, but I put it on that list because it's shown on the map. And Windthorpe down on the south coast is a former research site. It's now decommissioning. It's on a site of special scientific interest, so that takes some very careful decommissioning work to bring that to completion. The majority of these sites, with the exception of Culham, are administered by the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, and this is the structure of the NDA. You can see in the second box down, there's the NDA, and this shows the relationship that it has with, first of all, with government, where you can see that DEC provide the grant, but also then NDA report back management statements and financial memoranda. The Nuclear Decommissioning Authority employs site license companies to run its sites, with the exception of one, which we'll come to later on. They provide a contract to the site license company. The site license company provides fees and cost reimbursement to the NDA. Site license companies are owned by parent body organizations. As you can see there's a flow of management and specialists reach back towards the site license company and financial out. The site license companies are also responsible to the Office for Nuclear Regulation and the Environment Agency, and they have their own supply chains. So you can see there some of the terms that might be confusing about how does the supply chain work within nuclear. Site license companies run the sites for the NDA, and they are owned by parent body organizations. I'm going to run through a few of the various sites and describe what their structure is. If we look at Capenhurst, first of all, that's parent body there is Urenco. The site license company is, as you can see on there, and it's just got the one site. And there you can see, if you want to get more detail about that particular area, you can see the web link there. Capenhurst particularly specializes in uranium enrichment, and is very active at the moment. No pun intended. Culham is not part of the NDA estate. It's the cutting edge of research into fusion energy, Culham Centre for Fusion Energy. And basically it's working with a number of other countries, particularly within Europe, for the Joint European Torus Programme, Euratom, and other programs. If you want to find out more details about that, please take a look at their website. It's fascinating what they're up to. They are a challenge to supply to, as I've been informed, but a great national pioneering site for research into what may be the source of power for the future. And as I mentioned earlier, they've just had an £86 million funding boost from the government, which is always good news. Let's look at Dounreay. The site license company there is called Dounreay Site Restoration Limited, DSRL, and it's owned by Cavendish Dounreay Partnership Limited, which is Cavendish Nuclear, CH2M Hill, and URS, and the contract was awarded in 2012. Decommissioning is progressing well, and again it's a contractual, normal commercial type of arrangement to supply to Dounreay, and the details of how to supply to them are available on that link. It's a former advanced gas cool reactor site. LLWR Limited, that's a low-level waste repository limited. This is at Drigg, and the parent body organisation for this is the UK Nuclear Waste Management Limited, which is made up of URS, Studsvik, Areva, and affiliated with Serco. The contract was awarded in 2008 and renewed in 2013. Basically, this repository takes a low-level waste from sites around the country and stores it in a safe and managed way. They are actually a great customer to work with. They are very encouraging towards new suppliers, and a number of the clients that I've worked with have had very good experience with them, and some of the businesses that I've worked with have entered the nuclear supply chain firstly through LLWR. Magnox, this is the organisation that has all of the old power stations. Magnox Limited, owned by Cavendish Fluor Partnership. The contract was awarded in 2014. You can see all the sites there. And as I mentioned earlier, there is still a lot to do. The last reactor only came off the grid in 2015, so there's still a lot of decommissioning work to do there. And the Magnox site's website is a great place to start if you're interested in supplying to them. Magnox merged in 2015 with RSRL, Research Sites Restoration Limited, so you may see that RSRL on older nuclear documents. If you're wondering what's happened to that, that's merged with Magnox now. Coming a bit closer to home, Springfields Fuels is down at Preston. That's owned by Westinghouse, and they manufacture nuclear fuels. Still busy, and information available on the web link there. Sellafield had a big change in management. As I mentioned earlier, this is the only one that I'm aware of within the NDA estate, which is directly wholly owned by NDA, which occurred in April 2016. Prior to that, it was Nuclear Management Partners. And Sellafield is a busy site. It's the fuel reprocessing site, decommissioning. It's had a Calder Hall and the advanced gas tunnel reactor generations there. There are a lot of challenges to decommission Sellafield, and I'm going to refer to some of those in some detail later on in the presentation. So, how much is spent? Eva referred to a number before at the top of the presentation. The budget, I've put this down in big numbers, £3,240 million this financial year. £3.24 billion, which is an awful lot of money. And it comes mostly from government granting aid, £2.36 billion from the government and £880 million from commercial operations. So there's a lot of money involved in this. It's a lucrative business to be in, but you have to be good enough to get into the supply chain to profit from it. The expenditure splits in this way. 3.06 billion is on site programs and the rest is on non-site activities. NDA are good enough to publish what they are planning to spend their money on, which is great if you're thinking about getting into this sector and you're looking at something that you may be wanting to supply into. Take a look at this link, this document that's on this link, see what's coming up, and that will inform your business targeting, your marketing, your planning. If you are looking at getting into the nuclear sector, it takes a while. You have to be prepared to go through the process to get your business ready to supply, but it does help if you have a date and a project that you're aiming at. And the procurement plan from the NDA is one target document that can be used for that. How do you find out about the contracts? NDA use three systems. First one is the framework contracts, that's on Crown Commercial Services, and you can see there's a link there to the Crown Commercial Service, the Government Procurement Service website. So any new contracts will be published either there or here on Contracts Finder. Anything that's over £10,000 on Contracts Finder, that's a good place to look as well. And finally, on TED. That's the higher value stuff that's on there over the current EU threshold, which I believe is about €209,000. Very usefully also, I apologise, the formatting of the slide has changed a little bit, but the NDA also publish contract awards over 20,000 on Contracts Finder. So even if you don't succeed in winning a contract from them, you can find out who has, and you may then be able to consider becoming a supplier to the business which has won the contract. So that again is a source of leads for potential new business. The supply chain is structured in tiers. Tier 1 is the site license companies. Tier 2 are the direct suppliers to the site license companies, and they can be small to medium enterprises, SMEs. Tier 3 supply to Tier 2, and it goes on, as you can imagine. A number of documents and processes to qualify to begin to move into the supply chain. First of all, let's look at the supply chain charter. That basically says that you, as a business, commit to the values of the NDA. And it's quite a simple document. You read through it, sign it, send it off to the NDA, and they will then put your business name down as a signatory to the supply chain charter. You can then use their supply chain charter logo on your documentation, your emails, etc. And also then your company is visible on their website as a supply chain charter signatory. So if there are people within the NDA estate looking for suppliers, they may find you there. Easy thing to do, but it gets you onto the radar of potential procurement. NDA has contractual flow-down agreements with the site license companies. That means that some of the terms within the contract between the site license company and the NDA also have to apply to the suppliers to the site license company. It's important to understand this, and there are on the NDA website, there are several documents that will describe what the terms and conditions are that will be passed down. Intellectual property is an important aspect of this because NDA, not surprisingly, are very careful about intellectual property that is being developed for their sites because it can be strategically, commercially and security sensitive. There is a document that describes when IP will be owned by NDA and when it won't be owned by NDA. And if you're developing a new product or if you're developing new items, it's very important to understand that. I'll come back to the IP question later on in the presentation. Again, I've put the link in there for the contractual flowdowns for people to research later on if that's of interest. Bit of a busy map here, but basically there is a commitment that 25% of central government spend goes to SMEs, and the NDA is committed to this. So on the map you can see there's a lot of different blobs. It's quite an old one, it's got RSL on there, but it shows where the spread of all the small to medium enterprise suppliers are. However, interestingly, the three histograms on the left-hand side, the bar graphs, show that by far the biggest spend is in the northwest of England. That's over 60%. And split by type of SME, there are 700 micro businesses, that micro businesses with less than 10 full-time equivalent employees, and over 600 small businesses. Small businesses less than 50 full-time employees in that supply chain. And if you look at the third histogram down, I realise it's a bit small, but what that basically shows is that this is 2014 information. £60 million was spent in micro businesses and over £70 million in the small businesses. So there is some spend there. 60 and £70 million is not a huge slice of the billions that we were talking about, but there's a significant spend there and a significant number of businesses engaged. And our area, the Northwest, is the biggest area for expenditure. NDA activity to try to continue with engagement with SMEs includes SME steering groups, and there is a steering group in Cumbria. You'll be able to Google it. I think the chair at the moment is Bob Allison. Bob, if I'm wrong, I apologise. The steering group is basically there to take up any SME issues that occur with NDA so that it makes it more straightforward for NDA to deal with SMEs. So if there are issues that you find where you're struggling with something, some deal breaker or some other concern of a barrier, mention it to the steering group and they have the NDA's ear. There's also a mentoring scheme. I was involved in this a little while ago, where mentors, consultants are employed by NDA to assist businesses to become ready to supply into the NDA estate. NDA also run briefing sessions for SMEs to let people know what is coming up. And there is a fantastic annual supply chain event. So recently it's been done at Event City in Manchester. It's a must attend if you are serious about being in the nuclear supply chain. Everybody is there. You must go. It's usually around bonfire night. So there's still plenty of time to book for next year's. NDA have an action plan about how they are going to engage with SMEs, and that's the link to it. So that will show what their intention is and what they are doing to exceed the 25% of central government spend that is the target. So this is the split of the supply chain spend. And it's very obvious, and Magnox and RL are now the same business, but it's very obvious that the vast majority of the spend for NDA is at Sellafield. So, without further ado, let's look at how to engage with Sellafield, seeing as that's where the biggest share of the pie is. Apologies again for the formatting of this slide, but you can see these are the existing Tier 2 suppliers to Sellafield. This was taken from Sellafield site's website earlier today. Some of these businesses are SMEs. Some of them may be your customers at the moment, or some of them may be customers that you would like to target to get into the nuclear supply chain. A long list there covering lots and lots of different activities in terms of perhaps PPE supplies, consultancy, engineering, lots of different areas, site maintenance, facility management, electrical suppliers. You can see them all there, equipment hire people, lots and lots of different areas that you, as a potential supplier into the nuclear supply chain, could target as customers. And it is not so difficult to supply to a Tier 2 supplier as it is to become a Tier 1 supplier. Definitely worth considering. Sellafield provide a wealth of information for procurement for potential suppliers. There's a huge amount of information out there. They are good enough to produce a procurement plan and schedule, and it gives details of all the recently awarded and upcoming procurements that are over £100,000 and has a 3-year horizon. So again, this is a great document if you're thinking of supplying to Sellafield and you want to get into that supply chain. First of all, you can see who's recently won a contract, but also you can see what's coming up. And if you want looking to bid into that, you can start to target your business preparation towards that. To find the current tender opportunities, Sellafield have complete tender management, CTM, on their website. They publish everything on that. They also use the OJU, depending on the value of the contract. That's for higher value contracts and tenders, and also Contracts Finder, as we said before. A basic requirement of supplying into Sellafield is the Contract Quality Requirements Manual. It's not a huge document and it's mostly common sense, but you do need to read it and you do need to evaluate your business against it. There's a link there. It's easy to find the document, easy to read. It's not written in complex language, and it's a very good place to start if you're going to evaluate your business against Sellafield's criteria for supplying. I mentioned Complete Tender Management, CTM, and this is what the screen looks like. If you register with CTM, this is my login screen with them. You can see there that you can see all the tenders that you could search for. There's a lot of account modification and control boxes down the left-hand side. And what I've got open there, if you look in the middle of that slide, is standard tender questions. This is a very useful document because it's like a dummy tender. It's almost like a pre-qualification questionnaire. What it allows you to do is to look at what would be required to be able to make a bid without actually making one. So that, I would suggest, in addition to the quality manual that I referred to earlier, is a very good place to start. If you register with CTM and then look at the standard tender questions, fill them out, or use them as a gap analysis to see where you may need to find more information about your business, or you may need to develop your business to qualify to supply. This is what happens when you click through to it. It tells you that it's going to be valid until 2020, so you've got plenty of time to fill it in. And it gives you some useful information, but also then if you click through the boxes at the right-hand side, there, right and bottom, view questions, view invitation letter, print the request for tender, that's all very useful information. So I would recommend anybody who is serious about supplying to Sellafield to look at this and the contract quality manual. Recently, on the Sellafield website, there has been a new initiative launched which is called Link with Sellafield. Link stands for Liaise, Innovate, Network and Collaborate. And basically it's designed to provide Sellafield with direct access to SMEs so that that can support SL's contribution to the 25% supply target that central government has given. They're looking for collaboration and innovation from SMEs. Work packages will be published, and before you can submit a proposal, you must be pre-registered, and that takes place through the Sellafield website. The link is coming up in a minute. When you register, your details will be published on the website, so those who are looking at procurement from within Sellafield can see that you've registered as a supplier. Three categories. The first category is an SME, so less than 250 employees, the turnover less than 50 million, or a balance sheet less than 43 million euros. That is 50 million euros and 43 million euros. Second category is they're suppliers that are SMEs as they stand alone, as in less than 250 employees with less than 50 million euro turnover or less than 43 million balance sheet, but the business is actually part of a larger group. Category 2 suppliers will only be considered if there isn't a Category 1 supplier who can deliver the contract. And all of the link opportunities are below the OJEU threshold, and there's a link there to the registration form. There is a third category which is called supporting companies, and they are companies that don't meet the EU definition of an SME in terms of numbers of employees or turnover and balance sheet. They're not allowed to participate directly in Link, but they may participate as part of an SME-led proposal. So if you're an SME that wants to contribute to the Sellafield supply chain via Link, you could actually use a larger business to advise you and support you in that endeavour. Earlier in the presentation, I spoke about the challenges that Sellafield have, and they have a great innovation here. It's called Innovus Game Changers, where they are inviting small businesses to respond to the challenges that they face. I've worked with several businesses who've applied to this. You fill in the first application form. If you're accepted, you will receive a £5,000 grant to clarify and work on your idea so that you can present it clearly to Sellafield. You get support from FIS 360, which is an academic organization, two great guys, Ian Proctor and Frank Allison, who I've worked with very closely. Very proactive, very well connected, and they're very good to work with. They will assist you to the very best of their ability. And similarly with NNL, National Nuclear Laboratory, they will also assist. These guys are really on your side and they want you to succeed because the challenges are to solve them. It's to everybody's benefit. After the £5,000 grant, if you are successful, then additional proof of concept funding is available. That's through the University Nuclear Technology Innovation Fund, and that's Sellafield money. And the interesting thing about this is it's not state aid. So it shouldn't be subject to percentages like the state aid grants might be. I mentioned earlier about the NDA flow-down contractual conditions and intellectual property. Within Game Changers, intellectual property stays with you. Non-disclosure agreement is provided right at the beginning of any engagement in Game Changers, and you keep the IP. This is very important for small businesses, and a number of small businesses have not engaged in the past with the nuclear supply chain because they felt that they would lose their intellectual property rights. Game Changers is open to anyone, individuals, universities, small businesses, larger organizations, and wherever they're located, and that's the link. I mentioned there were a number of challenges, so this is a list of the challenge areas. Condition monitoring and inspection, analytical services, plant characterization, plant dismantling, post-operational clean-out, smart technology and digital solutions, waste handling and storage, waste characterization, decommissioning infrastructure, and surveillance and maintenance. Here's an acronym you may have seen before, SQUEP. Stands for Suitably Qualified and Experienced Person. It's important that not just your business structure and equipment and processes are suitable, but your people need to be suitable too. SQUEPness is competence, basically, and this is really what it's about. It's professionally qualified, several years as a practitioner, registered in the area of expertise with the organization, and whose judgment can be used to resolve a technical problem with some finality. And there's a little bit about SQUEP from the Contract Quality Requirements Manual. What are the next steps then? We've had an overview, and this basically has been a taster for an upcoming webinar. Fit for Nuclear is a great way to get your business ready to supply. It's run by the Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre at Rotherham, which is part of the University of Sheffield and also has an input from the University of Manchester Dalton Nuclear Research Institute. And it's part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapults, and it will support manufacturing innovation and supply chain development. So, okay, what does it do? First of all, let's assess our present-day readiness, then look at where the gaps are, then make some changes. These are the 6 areas that they'll look at: quality management systems, process excellence, design and project management, strategy and leadership, people excellence, and health and safety culture, all at no risk to the company. And this is basically the ladder to climb. Start with a capability questionnaire. The company self-assesses its own view. That is then reviewed, and then an advisor will visit to do a verification of that. That will generate an action plan, and then a further site visit to continue with the improvement process and the journey. You need to commit to this, but the timing is flexible. If I whet your appetite for that, if you're really serious about getting into the nuclear supply chain, I would recommend that you attend the next webinar on this subject, which is on the 16th of January. Nigel Goodrich from Fit for Nuclear will be presenting some details about that process, and registration for the webinar will be opening very shortly.
Thank you very much, Alan. We're going to take a moment to look at some of the questions that you've sent in, and we will be back with you shortly. Right, Alan, that's really interesting here. I've received a question here to say from a lady that runs a communication consultancy firm, and she's saying, how do I find a business that I can collaborate with in order to take advantage of opportunities in the nuclear sector? So I guess it's a very kind of broad general question. A very small company that, you know, obviously have opportunities to work within a larger project.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's a good way for small businesses to get into this supply chain and any other. It's a very similar question to one which was asked last week in the manufacturing webinar. Basically, first of all, I would suggest to look for the type of contract that you're interested in to see where you may be able to fit, and we've shown a few examples of where that information is available online. And network, meet people, find the businesses that might fit with you to form a consortium. There have been several very successful consortia in the past that have supplied into the nuclear supply chain, and you could see that some of the PBOs that we looked at back there in the presentation were consortia already. So it happens at that level as well, at site license company and PBO level, as well as down in the lower tiers of the supply chain. So I'm not sure that the Growth Hub can matchmake, but if you are looking to work together with other businesses, then I would suggest that if you do find businesses that are interested and have a similar viewpoint, that it would be worthwhile engaging with us to see if we can advise you on, first of all, how to structure your collaborative business, whether it's a joint venture or whether you operate as associates, and also to see whether there is anything that we can do in conjunction with Fit for Nuclear to assist you to become capable to supply. It's a bit of a general answer, I apologize for that, but I think it's all about people, really. It's finding the right people to work with. And if you're able to do that through the networking opportunities and through the information that's been published on the various websites, you have a strong chance of success.
Thank you very much, Alan. Right, okay, Alan has really provided us with some really interesting information and links across the whole civil nuclear sector here in the UK, and he's touched on many opportunities out there for businesses in nuclear and businesses that are providing non-nuclear services. So remember, think outside the box. You don't have to be currently providing you don't have to be a specialist advanced nuclear provider. You can be in catering, you can be a provider of PPE. The opportunities are out there. I would urge you to get in touch. The first port of call would be to get in touch with us. I've just put the slide up here. Support is available. Different types of support is available. So the best thing to do is send me an email, give us a call, and we can have a chat with you to see how we can best help you. If you have missed any points in this session, we will send you a link within 24 hours, and you will be able to replay the session. And again, if you wish to get in touch, and maybe even to get in touch with Alan, send me an email and we'll do our best to help you. So once again, thank you very much for attending. From Alan and I, good evening.